Joining us now, Democratic strategist and former Clinton advisor Richard Goodstein, and Republican strategist and MSNBC political analyst Susan Del Percio. Richard, other administrations, of course, have maybe not liked court rulings. They've, been critical of those rulings in certain cases. But to openly defy the courts, to throw specific judges under the bus, what is to stop President Trump from completely obliterating constitutional boundaries if the courts can't?
Well, it's honestly, I regret to say this, it's not crystal clear. Look, the Supreme Court has said that if a party takes it upon themselves to disregard an order of the court and disobey it, they're making a mockery of the judicial system. John Roberts and Alito have said as much about assertions of presidential power that they thought were totally unwarranted. The fact of the matter is the immunity decision from the Supreme Court bodes poorly for whatever we think there might be guardrails that the Supreme Court might impose on Trump. I'm not sure that we can kind of count on them to sort of block him from disregarding the court. There was that 5-4 decision we had recently where Roberts and Coney Barrett sided with the three liberals to basically stop Trump a little bit. But the fact of the matter is, I think that MAGA has thought this through. The Heritage Foundation has thought this through, and they basically concluded, we think the Supreme Court will be compliant enough that we can get away with murder virtually, literally. And I think it's just going to be mass protests. And what we saw after the 2017, the Women's March led ultimately to 2018 elections. So I think that that's frankly what we're looking at.
In the White House, President Trump himself have villainized this judge, Susan. We already have reporting about the greater threat environment courts are facing and members of the court are facing. How dangerous is it for them to single out judges, like in this case with Boasberg now being, called a lunatic, the calls for him to be impeached, et cetera?
It's extremely dangerous. And let's not forget, Donald Trump's been doing this since he was a candidate in 2015, calling out judges. He has constantly done that. The difference now is, as president again, he has the following who will potentially be violent against judges, and they are worried about it. You may remember back in a question of the Georgia case on whether the lead attorney could even be the attorney for the case, or the district attorney. One judge was hesitant to rule until the last possible moment because he was worried about the security of him and his family. So these are very real issues. And we're asking a lot of our judges to stand up and do the right thing, but that's what they're supposed to do. We're asking them to do their job. But again, to what Richard was saying, my big concern when it comes to the courts and Trump right now comes down to not if he defies the courts, but if he defies the court, the Supreme Court, because then there is nothing that can be done to rein him in. There's no enforcement of rulings when it comes to the courts. In theory, the Supreme Court's supposed to do that. But if they don't, that's when we literally have the constitutional crisis.
The other check on power is supposed to be Congress here, in this case, the check on the executive branch. But, we just heard Lee Gelernt of the ACLU saying Trump's thumbing his nose at Congress. And you don't have Republicans, which are in the majority in both chambers, doing anything about it. They're not trying to own their power. But when does that political calculation change where they see this potential overreach by the president as a liability?
Well, I think, like Richard said, when they're starting looking at 2026 and the reelect. But what's important to also consider right now when you're looking at those Republicans, they're happy not to have to take the votes. So if Donald Trump is doing everything and it's keeping his base happy and it's keeping their base happy, the fact that they don't have to take a vote doesn't make them open for criticism come 2026.
Well, Republicans are getting some blowback, not in this particular issue, but when it comes to the cuts from DOJ. So they've stopped doing a lot of these in-person town halls. Now, Democrats are going to those districts to meet with people on the ground. We saw one in Arizona yesterday, for example. Do you think that's going to be effective, Richard?
I do, and I'll tell you why. Because I think people out there are kind of looking to be inspired. And it's like, geez, if the Democrats can't even bring it to themselves to kind of create as much of a fuss as we think they're capable of, who am I to kind of step up and donate money, run for office or whatever? But I think, again, that's what happened after the 2017 Women's March. All these people, Abigail Spanberger, Mikey Sherrill, who are now running for governor in their respective states, they weren't in politics, but they looked at this and said, this is the time for me to step up. And I think that's what's going to happen here, thanks in part to these Democratic-led rallies in Republican districts, which will shame the Republican members, but also inspire people to kind of get active.
Richard Goodstein, Susan Del Percio. I saw that look. I know you got more to say. We'll come back and continue the conversation another day. Thank you both very much.